Hey church, today is week 4, the final week of our series exploring Lament. And as we wrap up, we are looking at how lament draws us closer to others. One of my all-time favourite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and it's this: "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I love it because nestled within these words is an important question that always makes me ponder. How do people feel after they've been in my presence? Do they leave feeling like they have encountered something of Jesus in me? That's a big question, isn't it? And if I'm honest, I can think of many occasions when this hasn't been the case, especially when it comes to supporting those who are hurting. As a parent, I know there are times when I've totally misjudged these situations and messed up. Times when my kids have tried to share painful or difficult experiences and I have jumped immediately into giving my opinion and advice. And I can vividly recall the look on their faces as they walked out of the room, frustratedly exclaiming, "You just don't understand." It can be hard to witness someone struggling, can't it? It feels uncomfortable, at times even painful, and understandably this discomfort often drives us to want to try and make things better, to ease their distress and take away both their pain and ours. But sometimes our response can leave people feeling worse. My children didn't want my advice or solutions. They wanted to feel listened to feel like someone else understood what they were going through, to know and feel that their experience was seen, heard, and held by another human without judgment. But instead, my reaction left them feeling frustrated, dismissed, and alone in their struggle. And there's actually a story in the Bible about a person who experienced a very similar thing. His name is Job. Now, to say Job was going through a bit of a rough patch is a massive understatement. Over a relatively short period, he loses all of his children, his home, possessions, livelihood, and was afflicted with an awful skin disease which left him covered in painful boils. And his friends, when they heard about his plight, were so concerned and moved, they immediately travelled to be with him, to comfort him. And they start out pretty well. It says they wept with him, tore their robes and threw dust over their shoulders to demonstrate their shared grief. And they sat on the floor in silence with Job for an entire 7 days and nights. That's pretty impressive, right? But then, after a whole week of silence, Job begins to speak. And he starts to lament and cries out in anguish to God. He is deeply raw and honest, at one point even cursing his own birth. And his friends do not respond well. In fact, they start challenging his lament. They accuse him of whining and mocking God. One friend actually calls him a windbag. And they insist that Job must be suffering on account of his sin, that essentially he must be bad, because according to their understanding, bad things only happen to bad people. And the dialogue goes back and forth between Job and his friends for some time, until right at the end, after chapters of Job pleading to God to speak and intervene, God finally replies. And I would encourage you to go away and read it in full, but as part of his response, God expresses anger at Job's friends. In chapter 42, verse 7, he says to them, "I am angry with you and your 2 friends because you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has." Now, Job says some pretty intense stuff to God. I don't think God is saying every single word Job has said about me is true, but he does seem to affirm Job's response to lament to God as the right response to his suffering, in contrast to his friends who responded by accusing and heaping heavy judgment and shame on Job. Job's friends could sit in the silence, but they couldn't handle his lament. They couldn't tolerate the expression of his grief. They were offended, at times horrified, and had no capacity to sit with the discomfort of his pain-filled words and questions without reacting. Instead, they felt compelled to speak out and defend God, coming up with all kinds of answers and advice, sticking passionately to their own limited perspective. And what began as an expression of solidarity ended in Job feeling attacked and alone. We can think we have the right words, strategies, and advice. We can pray eloquent prayers, even quote scripture. But if we're not able to connect with someone else's pain and journey alongside them in it, we will leave them feeling unseen and unknown. And we can't connect with someone else's pain unless we're willing to first connect with our own. Researcher and storyteller Brené Brown puts it like this: only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. And this is why lament is so important, because lament helps us engage with our own grief and difficult emotions, to grow more comfortable with acknowledging and expressing our pain. This in turn helps us to become more aware and present to the pain of others. It makes us less anxious and more able to listen to their pain without feeling like we need to fix it, to enter into their suffering and respond with empathy and compassion, just as Jesus did and does for us. Not from a place of superiority or because we think we know better like Job's friends, but because, like Jesus, we understand what it's like to be fully human. We've been there too. Christian artist Scott Erickson shared a profound experience he had at Disneyland in 2019. His family were doing a meet and greet with the characters from the film Inside Out. And if you're not familiar with the film, 5 of the main characters are based on the core emotions: sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and joy. So they get into this area with queues of people all waiting to meet their favourite character. And Scott quickly realised the longest queue by far was the one to meet sadness. Scott and his family joined the line and he recalled waiting. As we joined the end of the long line, I felt the cloud of holiness descend upon us. I felt the thin space. I entered into some kind of holy vortex. I heard myself whisper, "What's happening?" as I looked to the front of the line. I saw person after person wanting to have a moment of solidarity with someone they know so well, but maybe are afraid to admit it. After taking a family photo, Scott felt moved to have a photo on his own with sadness. And he described this moment as one of the most touching and unexpectedly holy moments. He felt permission to be sad. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine what God could do, the transformation and wholeness he could bring if we became people who not only embraced our own sadness, but gave permission and space for others to embrace theirs too. If we were known as people of deep compassion, comfort, and peace, who fearlessly hug, hold, and listen and sit with the pain and sorrow inside of others, just as God does for us. What comfort and hope could that bring? Not a fake or a shallow hope, but a hope based in the reality of who we are and who God is. And so as I finish, I want to leave you with the very same question I began with. How do people feel after they've been in your presence? May we have the courage to lean into our pain so that through God's redeeming, healing, transforming love, we can become people who are not ignorant, cut off, or apathetic to the pain in the world, but rather people who come alongside others and share in each other's pain. God's loving presence whispering through us, I see you, I'm with you, I care.